Thank you. The next item of business is consideration of Business Motion 5626 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a revised business programme for today. I would ask any member who wishes to speak against the motion to press their request to speak button now. And I call on Joe Fitzpatrick to move motion 5626.
Formally moved.
Thank you very much. And no member has asked to speak against the motion. Therefore, the question is that motion 5626 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick be agreed. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. The next item of business is a statement by Shona Robertson on the impact on and response by the NHS in Scotland to the global ransomware incident. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on Shona Robertson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, for the opportunity to make a statement on the impact and response of the NHS in Scotland to the recent global ransomware attack. Members will have seen news reports about the global impact of Friday's attack. In the UK, the main area affected has been the NHS. Across NHS England, 47 health organisations were infected with the malware, including 27 acute trusts, while in Scotland, 13 health boards have experienced some impact from this attack, although less severely than in England. I wanted to come to Parliament today to update members on the current situation. Members will be aware that a UK-wide criminal investigation is underway, led by the National Cyber Security Centre and supported by Police Scotland. Health boards will fully support these inquiries. My Cabinet colleague, Michael Matheson, Cabinet Secretary for Justice, participated in a meeting of the Cobra Committee yesterday afternoon, which was chaired by the Home Secretary to consider the consequences of this cyber attack. Ensuring services recovery from the cyber attack as quickly as possible has been a priority for health boards. What is clear that since Friday, health board staff, as well as staff within GP practices, have been working extremely hard to ensure that the impact of this attack does not affect the quality and the care provided by vital NHS services. I want to take the opportunity to thank them all for their efforts. Of the 13 boards affected, NHS Lanarkshire and NHS Borders had had the most significant impact. In response to this, as with other health boards, contingency arrangements were put in place, including manual standby systems to ensure that appropriate patient information was still being captured and that patient services were being delivered across the NHS. I'd like to take this opportunity today to reassure patients in Scotland that there has not been any reported breaches of patient data or personal details as a result of the attacks. Good progress has been made by all boards over the weekend in terms of recovery and mitigation. Most services, computer devices and systems are back online and operational on Monday morning. Many boards' IT staff are working on a 24-hour basis to ensure that appropriate fixes and the guidance issued by the National Cyber Security Centre are in place so that services are available to the public as quickly as possible. There will, however, still remain ongoing work by boards to ensure that staff report any issues so that these can be investigated. I've written to health boards to record my thanks to all staff involved in responding to these attacks and thanking them for the additional work that they've carried out since Friday to ensure that the impact has been managed appropriately. While investigations and reviews are underway, initial assessment highlighted that across health boards, less than 1% of devices have been affected. This is around 1,500 devices in total. NHS Lanarkshire and NHS Borders have now reported that they've made considerable progress in restoring systems and that patient services continue to be provided. NHS Lanarkshire have reported that less than 20 patients waiting for routine appointments have had to be rescheduled. While the response from health boards and their staff is to be commended, I'm sure, like me, many members will want to understand why the impact from this cyber attack has affected the NHS. My officials are working closely with health boards to gain an understanding of why this situation arose in the first place. Issues that will be considered through this work will be to understand whether health boards had appropriate patching regimes in place. This is the process of applying fixes from software and hardware suppliers onto IT systems to improve security. With less than 1% of devices infected, I think we can draw some comfort from that position. However, we must not be complacent. I should also make clear that the adoption of any patch from a supplier requires a technical assessment to ensure that there are no unintended consequences on NHS systems. My Cabinet colleagues are also seeking assurance across the wider public, private and voluntary sectors in relation to cyber preparedness. And the Scottish Government have contacted over 120 public bodies to seek assurance that they have appropriate resilience in place. The Cabinet Secretary for Justice will today chair a meeting of the National Cyber Resilience Leaders Board, which draws together a range of partners, including industry. The board will consider the circumstances that led to the attack, the multi-agency response and the steps that can be taken to enhance the future resilience across sectors. This is not a threat that government can combat alone. This is about all of us across all sectors working, sharing and learning together to reduce the impacts that these criminal attacks have on our organisations and the public. There continues to be substantial investment in IT across NHS Scotland. The Scottish Government provides funding of around £100 million per annum to health boards for IT investment and for maintaining cyber security resilience. Health boards spend at least the same amount per annum. However, we know that in 2016-17, the total spend was around £257 million. Although the attack was unprecedented in its scope, with hundreds of organisations affected across the globe, it was not an isolated incident. In fact, NHS Scotland, along with other organisations, face similar attacks every day, most of which are thwarted by the controls and protections that are in place. All health boards have IT security frameworks and policies in place. The IT environment across health boards is complex, with a mixture of legacy and new systems and technology. There is a continuing work programme in place to ensure all systems are updated as soon as possible as developments in technology move on. I can assure Parliament that the NHS in Scotland remains at the forefront of using digital technology to support the quality of patient services that we provide. There will be a number of lessons arising from these ransomware attacks that we must learn from. Reviews are already underway to capture what can be improved to ensure that we reduce the chances of a similar attack happening in the future. The Scottish Government will also be arranging a lessons learned exercise to help health boards and other agencies to mitigate the risks from further ransomware and other cyber attacks. However, due to these criminal activities, the NHS and all other parts of the public sector need to be vigilant and keep their systems up to date and fully protected at all times. This is a lesson that all parts of society can learn from. In conclusion, I want to reiterate that while the impact of these attacks has affected NHS boards, there has been no reported breaches of patient data or loss of personal details or any reported impact on patient safety. In addition, I commend the response of health board staff who have worked tirelessly to ensure the impact has been kept to a minimum. However, we cannot be complacent and we must ensure that the lessons identified are adopted by all health boards going forward so that we can minimise as far as we can the impact such attacks have on systems we use to deliver not just health but our public services in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the contents of her statement. We'll have about 20 minutes. I would ask any member who wishes to ask a question to press their request to speak button now. And I call on Donald Cameron.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I refer to my register of interest and the fact that I'm on the board of 2 companies which invest in health technology? I'd like to thank the Cabinet Secretary for advanced view of her statement. This incident is unjustifiable and indiscriminate. And I too would like to begin by thanking the IT staff across Scotland who have worked tirelessly to get the NHS back online and the medical staff who have continued to provide care in the face of adversity. And I would add my thanks to the words of the Cabinet Secretary. And I welcome too that there has been no breach of patient data reported. We must also bear in mind that this is not just about infrastructure, but patients in our hospitals and health centres have been affected. Operations were cancelled and people were not able to get to their scheduled appointments. It may be the case that across the NHS, one of the reasons IT systems have failed is because out-of-date software is still being used. Can I therefore ask the Cabinet Secretary, how will the continuing work programme she refers to in her statement ensure that systems are not only upgraded now, but will continue to be kept up to date in the future?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I thank Donald Cameron for his questions and certainly his comments about the efforts of staff. The IT systems across the NHS are complex, and of course some of them are different because they serve different purposes. So the NHS systems that will be used within an acute hospital will be different from those used by special boards, for example. So having the same system in all of our NHS boards is not the issue. They will be different because they serve different purposes. At the moment, we understand that mainly Windows 2007 and Windows 2003 devices were affected, and only a small number of Windows XP devices were affected. I know Windows XP has been an issue that has been raised within the media. What I can say about that is that there are approximately 6,500 XP devices out of around 150,000 total devices, which is less than 5%. So what I'm saying is it's not straightforward that it's about one piece of software compared to another. What we need to understand is that across these different softwares that were affected, why were some affected and not others? And that's the piece of work that will now be undertaken. Obviously, I'm sure Donald Cameron will appreciate all of the efforts have been about getting the systems back up and running and sorting problems so that the patient impact can be minimised. The next phase is now to understand more about the software, what went wrong in those areas that it went wrong, and more importantly, what can we do to make sure that we improve the resilience of those systems. I would just end by reiterating, though, that this was less than 1% of devices that were affected, which meant that 99% of devices were not affected by this malware. So although that provides some context, Donald Cameron can be assured that I am in no way complacent about that.
Anna Sawar to be followed by Stuart Stevenson. Anna Sawar.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for prior the statement, and also join the Cabinet Secretary in thanking all those IT and NHS staff who have worked round the clock to get the situation under control. In December, following Freedom of Information requests that showed that almost every health board in Scotland had been targeted by a ransomware attack, Scottish Labour called for a review into cyber security. In February that just passed, we exposed a security breach that involved NHS staff whose details were leaked, and again we repeated that call for a review on cyber security. And it follows 7 years of questions from my colleague Richard Simpson, who is no longer in this Parliament. Can I then ask the Cabinet Secretary if we now will have a review into cyber security right across the NHS? Secondly, given that we've had a history of ransomware attacks, can she confirm if we have ever had to pay out any ransoms to any ransomware attacks? And thirdly,